Welcome to Look Ahead Radio with Tom Arms and Lockwood Phillips.
Both Ross and I are looking forward to this. Viewpoints around the world with Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio and, of course, LookAheadNews.com. We have the phone lines open if you'd like to ask Tom questions and get to some conversation with him. 910 area code of our listening audience, 353-4674. That's 353-4674. 252 area code 247-7282. That's 247-7282. Toll free 800-818-2255. Via email at viewpointsradio@hotmail.com. Via Facebook at Viewpoints on the Talk Station. That's Viewpoints on the Talk Station. We have Tom Arms standing by, and we're going to get to him as we get into the program. And again, remind you the phones are open. I know that we've got one caller standing by, and we're going to get to him in a moment. But Tom, good evening, and several quick administrative questions. First, how's the weather there in London?
Cold and wet.
Okay. And then second question is, did you get any sleep last night?
I went to sleep at 6 a.m.
Okay, so you were watching with bated breath the election results last night?
Yes, right up until, Trump was declared the winner.
What was the reaction to the election in London and in Great Britain? We'll get to France and other countries here a little later on, but what was the reaction?
Okay, I like to look at it from a foreign policy point of view mainly. And there's a premier think tank. Really, the premier foreign policy think tank in Europe is called the Royal Institute for International Affairs. It's also known as Chatham House.
Okay.
And I'm just going to read what Zena Wickett wrote today at Chatham House, and that is that this has been an ugly election and has really dented America's idealized image abroad. Democracy has been irrevocably weakened, and it has stripped the gloss from Western democracy itself. If this is what democracy looks like, then many simply don't want it. America's position as a superpower is likely to decline very rapidly now. It's unclear that other Western and Asian allies will want to follow the U.S., or that the U.S. will want to lead. The urgent need to heal domestic divisions and rebuild trust at home will see U.S. financial and political resources turn inwards. And with America stepping back from the global stage and its allies in Europe transfixed on Brexit, the West will be unable to lead globally and its institutions will likely stagnate. Okay. Other countries, including China and Russia, will take advantage of this and may be in for a sharp shock should Trump respond negatively.
All right, now that was written by whom at the Chatham House again?
Zena Wickett at Chatham House. And I think that probably sums up the position here in Europe quite well.
The interesting aspect of this, Tom, is that many of us here in the States don't feel that we necessarily need to lead the world. We have other countries that should be major players. And, of course, this has been one of the debate issues and campaign issues that the comment was that Mr. Trump would weaken NATO. There are many who would argue, no, that he is asking and suggesting that members of NATO step up and pay their fair share or at least participate in their fair part of the program. But that is something that, while it's heard among the European community and there in Great Britain, I think vast majority of the community here in the United States, even Democrats and liberals, would feel a little uncomfortable about that observation. We've got some callers standing by. I want to get to them in a moment.
I just say that nature abhors a vacuum.
Well, and we hope that the United Kingdom and France and Germany will be willing to step in to fill that vacuum if, in fact, one exists. So we'll get to that in a moment. We've got some callers standing by, and Walter in Alliance has an observation and would like to share that with us, and he has relatives there in the United Kingdom. Walter, good evening, and, of course, Tom Arms with Look Ahead Radio with us. Yes, sir.
Tom, you might have remembered the phone call I had when Brexit fell, and right after I heard the vote, I called my cousin in England, and he took the Chicken Little point of view that was the end of the world, and he was ready to go to Australia. Well, I called him last night at 4 a.m., which was 8 o'clock your time. And it was the same thing. The sky is falling. Trump's the worst thing in the world. Now that, and he said, and I heard this on the news, that the Prime Minister of Holland was jumping up and down for joy, and that I think it was the German Minister of Finance was getting all excited, because what was happening was, again, the populace was speaking. It wasn't the government. It wasn't Washington. It wasn't Belgium like it was in Brussels, like it was in Brexit. And you mentioned the vacuum. My God, Obama and Hillary Clinton created a vacuum. Leaving the Middle East created a vacuum. Neville Chamberlain saying peace in our time created a vacuum. So, and at the same time, Lockwood is correct about paying your fair share. I mean, we get saddled with bills from the United Nations, which is trying to tell us what to do. And quite frankly, I'm trying to get to England to visit my relatives, but I don't want to go to the cities because it's not the England that I once knew. I was in England when I was a kid. They used to march with the guards in front of Buckingham Palace before they put them behind the fence. So, fish and chips and newspaper, that's what I remember.
You've raised an interesting point, and that is, you probably remember Bill Clinton's famous comment, it's the economy, stupid.
Stupid.
And it isn't anymore. And there's a chap, I was talking to Tim Bale at Queen Mary University, and he's thinking in terms of the context of Brexit and in the terms of Trump winning the American election. And he says it's not the economy anymore. It's cultural identity that has taken the place of the economy as the determining political factor. That people feel under cultural threat. Their culture is under threat. And
the same thing here, too.
That is one of the big reasons.
We have to learn how to speak French in Canada. The Canadians have to have the labels turned towards the front of the counter in French. And now, what happens in England is you go to a shop and it's all Muslims.
I don't think you can use Canada as a good example because the French were there even before the English.
Let me interrupt here with both of you. Walter, very good points. Thank you very much. You articulated the argument exceedingly well, I might add. Tom, the other aspect of this, and I understand the issue of culture, it is important, but it's directly related to economy. And I agree. And one of the things that we've heard, and we heard this morning a caller to our program who commented that the folks on the street, and this is true in Brexit, and we've got to get to this, bring in the Brexit issue as well. The average worker out there, whatever the task, and by the way, white collar, blue collar is immaterial. The average person who's working every day to produce a product and be a participant in the community, they feel they are being ignored by the leadership. And I would argue very quickly, and Walter, do stay with me, I would argue very quickly, Tom, that Brexit really was the first stone in the dam as it burst. And we're going
I have no argument with that. I agree with you entirely that Trump was saying, I think last night, that we're going to have Brexit 10 times over. Well, he was referring to Brexit. All through the campaign, he kept referring to Brexit.
Right.
He goes up on the stage and hugs Nigel Farage. No, Brexit, the issue of taking back control, the issue of immigration, the issue of the culture being under attack, the issue of the Rust Belt, all these things were Brexit issues.
Right.
And they were issues in the presidential elections in America. And the success of Brexit, I think, made people in America think, well, maybe we can do the same thing here.
I would disagree. Walter, step into this conversation.
Yeah,
but I disagree.
I would disagree also.
I disagree. I don't think it's a matter we thought we could. What you are seeing is a undercurrent of great discomfort and distress that's been ongoing now for 8 years. Back to you, Walter.
16 years.
Okay.
And if it hadn't been for 9/11, I think it would have been completely different. But Bush was a little light in the loafers. We had Reagan, and then we had Clinton, and Clinton rode Reagan's coattails. But this vacuum that you talk about, Europe is allowing the migration. You're allowing the migration, just as you allowed Hitler to take over.
I don't think that's fair. I think it's a humanitarian issue for Europe. You know, you've got these millions of people who would literally otherwise die or be stuck in camps where for years and years and years. And not on top of that, Germany needs the workers. There is a recognition that if people want to keep free trade, if governments want to keep free trade, they have to find a way of decoupling it from free movement of people. And I'm quoting there a chap at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow, John Curtis. And I think that is becoming a more common realization on the part of the political establishment over here. They've got to find a way of decoupling the free movement of people, which is at the very core of the European Union, from the issue of free movement of capital and goods.
Your comment that Neville Chamberlain's willingness to roll with Germany on the issue, if I'm not mistaken, was it Czechoslovakia?
And it's in Czechoslovakia. It's placating.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. I would argue very quickly, and this may be a bit of a twist on the topic of humanitarian effort, but that was a humanitarian effort on the part of Sir Neville Chamberlain to avoid a war of major proportions, which is a humanitarian approach. I applaud that. Unfortunately, at some point, you have to put your hand out and say no more.
I just think that it's a conundrum, whatever happens, but this idea that we have to take care of everyone. The sinking of the Titanic, there's only so many people that can be in the lifeboat before the lifeboat sinks. Then what happens?
Well, I just think you have to be very careful. If you are going to withdraw, you have to be very careful that there's someone to take your place. And at the moment, there isn't. There's nothing in Europe to take your place. There is no unified military command. They're talking about it, but it's going to take years to happen. There's nothing in the Middle East. You know, you're going to be leaving a vacuum. You can't give nuclear weapons to South Korea and Japan.
Okay, I do not believe that all those of you, what you have said, are going to occur. We were talking about that off air a few moments ago. I think in many instances, the candidate, Donald Trump, was using metaphorical speech to get the attention of his electorate, and I think he did so successfully. We're going to get back to that in a few moments. Walter, thank you very much for the call. I appreciate you've been very patient and very, very astute observations. You're listening, of course, to Viewpoints Around the World with Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio. He's joining us this evening. More to talk about. As a matter of fact, we've got other callers. But I do want to get into the news, what other media are saying. We've heard what the political pundits and the geopolitical observers are saying. But, Tom, I want to hear what are the headlines there in Great Britain and also possibly in Germany and Italy and Spain. How are they reporting this? Stay with us here on Viewpoints Around the World.
Look Ahead Radio will return in just a moment.
This is Tom Arms with LookAheadNews.com's World Report for the week beginning the 14th of November. LookAheadNews.com broadcasts tomorrow's news today so that you can plan to participate. What will the Trump administration look like? Next week, the bones of a Trump cabinet will become apparent as the first announcements are likely to be made. While President-elect Trump is pondering his cabinet and staff appointments, President Obama will be flying around the world with visits to Europe and Peru for a summit of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Council. Also in Lima is Chinese President Xi Jinping, who stays on for a few more days to celebrate the 45th anniversary of Sino-Peruvian diplomatic relations. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau flies from the APEC summit to first Argentina and then Cuba. In Europe, the EU's foreign, defence and trade ministers meet in Brussels on Monday. The international impact of the election of Donald Trump will dominate the agenda. In London, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, who has sought sanctuary in the Ecuadorian embassy, is interrogated by Ecuadorian prosecutors about Swedish sex charges. In France, the Republican Party on Sunday holds the first round of primary elections for the party nomination for next spring's presidential election. The two top candidates are Nicolas Sarkozy and Alain Juppé. The oft-postponed presidential elections are also expected to be staged in Haiti on Sunday. The last attempt at a poll fell victim to Hurricane Matthew. And finally, the dress worn by sex siren Marilyn Monroe when singing Happy Birthday to President Kennedy is up for sale on Thursday in Los Angeles. It is the second time that the form-fitting sequin dress has come under the hammer. In 1996, it sold for $1.26 million. And that was next week's News Today, so that you can plan to participate in the world around you. Stay tuned after this message for LookAheadNews.com's expanded world analysis.
They say the best things in life are free. So, hey, why are we paying so much for our basic information and entertainment needs? The average cable TV bill has more than doubled in the last 10 years. The price of movie tickets keeps going up. So, exactly what is free today anyway? Well, you're listening to it. Local radio. Support the advertisers that support this radio station. And keep listening. We won't send you a bill. There are still some things you just shouldn't have to pay for.
This is Tom Arms with LookAheadNews.com's expanded world analysis for the week beginning the 14th of November. LookAheadNews.com broadcasts tomorrow's news today so that you can plan to participate. A victorious Donald Trump next week starts getting down to the business of forming an administration. Who will hold the key cabinet and White House positions? Names on the short list include former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani, New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich, and General Mike Flynn. Who goes where will be the first indicators of the super salesman's determination to implement his campaign rhetoric. That rhetoric has left European leaders seriously concerned, and on Monday, foreign, defense, and trade secretaries meet in Brussels to discuss their worries. Is the U.S.-EU free trade agreement dead? Will the U.S. continue to stand up to Russia and Europe and the Middle East? Should the Europeans speed up plans for a European army? Does France need to beef up its nuclear deterrent? Will EU foreign policy diverge from Washington's? President Obama will seek to reassure Europeans on a whirlwind tour next week, which will take in Greece, Germany, France, Italy, and Britain. He will be doing the same at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in Lima, where leaders will want to know what will happen to NAFTA, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, climate change agreements, Sino-American trade, and U.S. defense commitments in Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines. China will be particularly interested in the opportunities presented by an American pullback. President Xi Jinping will stay on in Peru for an extra 3 days following the APEC summit to cement already strong Sino-Peruvian ties. Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of the Western Hemisphere's second most powerful country, is also at the Lima summit and is flying on to Argentina and Cuba. In Havana, he meets Cuban leader Raul Castro, who's worried that the Trump administration will reverse President Obama's move to normalize Cuban-American relations. Among the Western allies, France has been the loudest anti-Trump voice. On Sunday, the Conservative Republican Party stages round one of the primary elections for the party's nomination for the presidential election next April. Round two is the following week. The two main contenders are former President Nicolas Sarkozy and former Prime Minister Alain Juppé. There are also first-round presidential elections planned next Sunday in Haiti. If no one wins an outright majority, the second round will be on January 8th. Elections held in June 2015 were declared fraudulent, and fresh elections were scheduled for October 9th, the same day that Hurricane Matthew hit the troubled island. And that was next week's News Today, so that you can plan to participate in the world around you. Stay tuned after this message for viewpoints around the world with myself and Lockwood Phillips.
Welcome back to Look Ahead Radio. Here is Lockwood Phillips.
Viewpoints around the world with Tom Arms here on the talk station. Of course, Look Ahead Radio, heard every Friday afternoon here on the talk station, and of course in radio stations around the world as well. And also with LookAheadNews.com. Tom, I want to go on to other issues. We were chatting a few moments ago about the observations by Zena Wickert?
Zena Wickert at Chatham House.
Wickert at Chatham House. But I'm curious, what's been the headlines there in Europe? How is the press playing this?
The press is playing it as a leap, much like as in Brexit. We're entering a period of great uncertainty, a leap into the unknown. Trump has always been long on theory, if you like, and short on detail.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Right.
he makes big statements, but he doesn't fill it in with the detail. And we don't know what a lot of the detail is going to be on his foreign policy. I think if we start just with Europe, and we look at France, Germany, and the European Commission, and then we can move on to other parts of the world elsewhere, or later. The EU Commissioner, Federica Mogherini, has said that transatlantic ties with the US will transcend the election of Donald Trump,
Mm-hmm.
which is interpreted quite simply as, we don't like you, but we have to make an effort.
Well, that is not unusual. I would say that that has been the case with other world leaders and other political leaders around the world.
That is pretty much the case right around the world. Now, the French president was a bit more forthright. He said, quite simply, that the election of Trump opened up a period of uncertainty for the world. Now, he drew some conclusions. He said, as a result of this, and you probably like this, that there was a greater need for united Europe.
Okay.
To wield influence on the international stage and promote its values and interests separate from those of the United States. Okay? Now, you see, you may or may not like this, because the result is if you have the Europeans taking more responsibility for the defense, or the Japanese or the South Koreans, they're going to want to have the political power that goes with it. And that political power, those views, are not going to be the same as those of Washington.
Now, here's a quick question for you, Tom. The current administration has been saying for quite some time that it's important for other countries to step up to the plate. In fact, and this was one of the arguments that was posed to me by a surrogate for Mrs. Clinton, and the argument was that under Trump, we would be leaving our NATO allies, that we would be exiting the world stage. And my retort to that was, look at Syria. We've already done that. We've got a president who has been trying to extract this country and himself and his administration from 6 wars underway right now just in the Middle East. So there's nothing really different here. The difference is, I think that Mr. Trump has been a little bit more forthright, you used that term a few moments ago, that the current administration has not been. So I don't see that there's a significant change. And by the way, other than giving lip service to the European Union, I haven't seen President Obama and this administration doing a great deal strengthening the ties between Great Britain and the European Union. In fact, I might add, since Great Britain voted to leave the European Union, I think that our administration, the current administration, has worked to strengthen the ties with Great Britain.
Well, I think Trump would make ties even closer.
Well, good.
I think that, to be quite honest, I think Trump's going to have a lot of difficulties with the European Union countries, and he's going to need friends, and he's going to need close friends, and the one that's most likely to fill that need is going to be the UK.
Hallelujah.
Which is good news for the UK.
Yes.
Because it gives it more influence in Europe, which it is effectively lost through Brexit.
You say that Great Britain's going to lose through Brexit, but right now we're not sure that France will stay in the European Union. There's a question about, if I'm not mistaken, Norway. There are other countries that are looking at exiting from the European Union because the general populace of each of those countries is very unhappy by the, if you will, shadow leadership that occurs in Brussels.
But they haven't left yet. Well, and by the way, Norway's not a member of the EU.
Oh,
I think you're thinking of Denmark.
Denmark. Okay, I apologize. Thank you.
But back to the issue of the foreign policy. It's not just the Middle East. It's not just NATO. It's a whole range of things. It's the relations with Russia, for a start. I mean, the fact that Trump has said that he likes authoritarian type personalities such as Putin, that he wants to talk to Putin, that he wants to do a deal with Putin over Syria, that he's intimated that he wants to do a deal with Putin over Ukraine. The thought that he wants to do a deal with an authoritarian government and he likes Putin is just anathema to the liberal democracies of Europe. They don't like Putin. He is a threat to them. He's a threat to the Baltic states. He sends his planes down along the English coast to buzz the coast. He sends his ships out and his planes out to buzz ships, both American, British, and Swedish, and German in the Baltic Sea. He's in Syria because he wants to establish a presence there, a permanent presence for Russia, which would create a threat to Europe. And that is the sort of person that Trump wants to do a deal with.
The argument is what qualifies as a deal. That's number one. And number two, the situation in Syria.
He says he admires him.
Well, he's impressed. Well, I have no problem with admiration in the sense that he's a strong leader, obviously a dictatorial leader.
I have no admiration for Putin at all. He's a dictator.
We'll get into other issues here. Before we go to the break, I want to go quickly to a caller. We've got James in Midway Park joining us. James, I haven't heard from you for a while. Good evening.
Yeah, well, I got news for you. Good or bad, I don't care. But thing is, all I hear, all I see is the solidifying of our part, well, the former United States part of being a part of the one world government, plain and simple. And it's going to happen. Why? Because God himself prophesied it way back when.
All right.
And you are seeing it. Look, we have right now James. 800 prison camps ready to throw Christians and constitutional believers into them right now.
All right, James, I understand where you're coming from, and quite frankly, the argument is not about a long-term future. It's about today and what we're dealing with today. I appreciate where you're coming from, but I don't see that we are going to. I have greater faith in our future than you. I've got to go to this break, but I appreciate your observation. Thanks very much. You're listening, of course, to Viewpoints Around the World with Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio, LookAheadNews.com. When we come back, Tom, I want to go back to how other countries are reporting on the election last evening. Were there any pundits that thought that Mr. Trump had a chance? There's so many here in this country that did not. Be interested in that observation as well. Viewpoints Around the World with Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio and, of course, LookAheadNews.com.
Look Ahead Radio will return in just a moment.
Quick, what do these sounds have in common? These are the sounds of geography. Geography helps us understand connections between people and places. But our kids aren't getting enough of it. Half can't locate Japan or India, and 20% can't even find the Pacific Ocean. So we created MyWonderfulWorld.org to give kids the power of global knowledge. Go to MyWonderfulWorld.org to learn more. It's a wonderful world.
Observations of an Expat by Tom Arms. It's the beginning of the end of Pax Americana. For 71 years the world has sheltered under the wings of the American eagle. The result has been one of the longest periods of prolonged peace, prosperity, and political advancement in world history. The U.S. created the United Nations, rebuilt a devastated Europe with the Marshall Plan, established NATO to defend Europe from Soviet aggression, pushed back the Chinese and Russian communists in Korea, protected Japan and the Philippines, provided billions of dollars in aid to help hundreds of nations emerging from centuries of colonialism, and championed the cause of free trade, which has led to unparalleled global growth. All right, it has not been perfect. Vietnam was a massive miscalculation. The rise of jihadism has its roots in Washington's Middle East policy, and world growth has been at the expense of American manufacturing jobs. The world pie has grown, but America's slice of it, although still bigger than anyone else's, has shrunk from its post-war heyday. Has it been worth it? Well, the American electorate clearly don't think so. They've voted in a president who wants to tear up trade agreements, build walls, impose tariffs, deport millions, end climate change agreements, and shrink America's defensive umbrella. Why should the rest of the world care? Is it just because we don't want the free ride to end? No, because as flawed as it was, America was the best superpower ever. Oh, yes, it was overpowering, arrogant, and determined to protect American interests. Any and every country does that. But its foreign policy was built on a domestic base of representative democracy and a strong will to do the right thing. Throughout history, we've seen that the exit of a world power leads to uncertainty and war as the powers in waiting compete to take on the mantle of numero uno. So, who are the contenders? China, Russia, and possibly a European Union which is currently floundering in a post-Brexit sea. China makes no secret of its ambitions. It believes that its top-down authoritarian-style government is superior to bottom-up Western democracies. For proof, they hold up the example of their economic success. Then they point their finger at the self-destructive presidential campaign which America has just endured and will continue to suffer from for some time. The Chinese are busily projecting their economic, political, and growing military power. Africa is one example. The South China Sea is another. America's nuclear umbrella and 72,500 U.S. troops in Asia are a significant deterrent to Chinese dreams. Russia's another authoritarian wannabe, if only because Moscow is bitter at losing the Cold War. The economic failure of Putin's corrupt state capitalism has hindered him somewhat, but his willingness to compensate by flexing Russia's residual military power has won the respect of President-elect Trump. Instead of trying to contain Russia, he talks of combining forces with the untrustworthy bear to fight ISIS at a time when the jihadists appear to be on their knees. For the time being, the authoritarian regimes of China and Russia have found common cause in offering themselves as alternatives to Western democracies. But it won't last. The only democratic alternative is the EU. However, Brexit has exposed the weakness of its political institutions and eliminated the member with Europe's longest and best established democratic traditions, largest military and closest ties to the United States. Britain was the balance that prevented either French or German dominance of Europe. At the moment, economic powerhouse Germany is in the ascendant. But if Europe is to play a bigger international role, then it needs a unified military establishment. France, with its nuclear arsenal, is best placed to play the defense role. This leaves the two European powerhouses competing for political supremacy. So, America, rest in peace. I'm afraid that the rest of the world will not.
We now return to Look Ahead Radio. Here is Lockwood Phillips.
Viewpoints around the world with Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio and, of course, LookAheadNews.com. Tom, thank you for staying with us. I know it's been a long day for you. It has been for Ross and myself as well. We've had a pretty contentious race here in North Carolina all by itself. Quite a turnover in the gubernatorial race. The governor's right now losing to his opponent, former Attorney General Roy Cooper. But we're feeling a little better now, at least many of us, that the election is over, and we are feeling confident that the will of the people has been heard. You know, I want to go to this in relationship to, and then we'll talk about the other newspapers and some of the headlines, Tom, but the other aspect of what took place in the United States. And I'm wondering if pundits have done a comparison of the populism and the popular vote and the movement, the grassroots movement, here in the United States in comparison to what took place in Great Britain with Brexit and what is taking place in other countries, Germany and France. Is there an awareness that maybe the leadership needs to be a little more sensitive and a little more attuned to the general populace?
Absolutely. They see what happened in the United States as being almost a carbon copy of what happened here in the UK at Brexit. And in fact, earlier one of your callers was talking about how they've been defriended or unfriended on Facebook by family members over the election. I've had the same thing happen to me over Brexit. A friend of over 40 years, my very best friend, will not speak to me, hangs up the phone, will not answer my emails, simply will not speak to me because we're on opposite sides on the Brexit debate.
When did I do that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, you go back further than 40 years.
I guess I do. Yes. Well, all right. It is fascinating how passionate these issues have become.
Yes, they've become very passionate. And I think partly because, as I said earlier, it is a matter of cultural identity.
Mm-hmm.
It's who we are. It's what we feel rather than just a matter of dollars and cents. But you were asking earlier if any of the pundits came out for Trump or anything.
Or at least predicted this as a potential.
Yeah. There was a chap called Jason Reifler. He didn't actually predict it. Jason Reifler is a professor of political science at Exeter University, and he's come up with a political theory called the backfire effect,
mm-hmm.
which is very interesting. And what he says basically, that if you correct someone often enough, it has the exact opposite effect of what you intend, that it just reinforces the original thinking. So the campaign, the Clinton campaign was always correcting the facts. You know, they're doing these fact checks on what Trump was saying all the time. They're saying, well, he's wrong on this, he's wrong on this, he's wrong on that. But instead of persuading people that he was wrong, they were only convincing them that they should believe him.
But this goes to the issue of credibility. And one of the issues we've talked about on the media here at the talk station is the failure of the media to concern itself with its credibility and its neutrality. And the other one is that we're seeing a lack of credibility and trust in leaders. And the media, unfortunately, the Fourth Estate, is seen as part of that leadership. What is the outcome there in Europe?
Well, in terms of the media, well, I mean, in this country, the media played a big part in securing exit from Brexit or exit from the EU.
Really?
Because it was a very conservative controlled media here, and they campaigned heavily for withdrawal from the EU and played a major role in it. And a lot of people criticize the media here for taking a too conservative line, and pushing for Brexit and basically pushing out a lot of lies about the European Union.
There are interesting comparisons here in the U.S. with that.
Now, with the U.S., it's exact opposite. What you're saying is the media was liberal.
Right.
And so people turned against the media.
Yep.
Because they didn't believe it, because they didn't want to believe it. This is what Jason Reifler's backfire effect is.
All right, we're about to wrap it up, and as we do, a quick question for you, and we'll, of course, be talking with you next week about this very subject. How long will it take for the world politique to come to grips with the changes in the U.S.? Will it happen in a week, or will it take months?
Years.
Wow.
It really depends. I think a lot of it depends on whom Trump appoints as his advisors in his cabinet. And whether or not they're going to be able to hold him back a bit.
Provide some discipline. Understood. Tom, as always, thank you for being with us this evening. Tom Arms of LookAheadNews.com. That's Tom Arms, here on Viewpoints Around the World.
Look Ahead Radio is a production of the Talk Station.